The scar tissue on my left hand still felt tight, a constant physical reminder of the day my life broke in two. 14 years. That's when they called. My name is Amelia Vance. I own a small bakery in a quiet Vermont town now. It's a simple life, a good life, built with my own two hands. A stark contrast to the sprawling wealth and complicated lies of the Vance family estate back in Connecticut, where I grew up and where they still live. 14 years since I left with just one suitcase. Since the fire. Since the accusations. Since they looked me in the eye, my own family, and chose who to believe. And it wasn't me. I was 20 years old, my hand bandaged, my heart shattered. My father, Charles Vance, a man who built his fortune on steel and showed the same unforgiving hardness, pointed at the door. He called me a liar, reckless, ungrateful. My mother stood silent. My younger brother, David, the golden child, shifted his weight and looked at the floor. They didn't just kick me out. They erased me. My photos disappeared from the walls. My name wasn't mentioned at family gatherings. I ceased to exist to them. My phone rang just as the warm smell of sourdough filled the bakery. An unknown number from Connecticut. My stomach clenched. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the screen, the scar tissue on my hand pulling slightly. I answered. Hello? Amelia? Oh God, Amelia, is that really you? It was my sister, Claire. Her voice was thin, strained, on the edge of panic. 38 now, I calculated automatically, still living under their roof, under their thumb. I hadn't spoken to Claire, or anyone in the family, since that day. She'd watched it all happen, just like Mom. Silent witnesses to my exile. What do you want, Claire? No softening, no pretending. Time had healed anything. It's Mom, she choked out, a sob catching in her throat. She had a stroke last night. It's bad, Amelia. The doctors aren't saying much, but it's bad. A cold wave washed over me, quickly followed by the familiar sharp sting of old wounds. Sadness for the woman who gave birth to me. Yes, but buried under years of neglect and betrayal. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, my voice carefully neutral. But why are you calling me? I haven't been part of the family for a long time. That was made clear 14 years ago. Don't say that. Please. Her voice broke. We need you, Amelia. Dad, he's not handling it. He's shutting down, won't talk to anyone, won't make decisions. He just keeps saying your name, asking for you. He's asking for me. The man who told me I was a burden, a mistake. The man who cut me off, financially and emotionally, leaving me completely alone. The man who believed David's lies without a second thought. It was absurd. It was another twist of the knife. He's asking for me, I repeated, letting the incredulity show. After he blamed me for the fire, after he called me a liar to everyone he knew, after he made sure I couldn't even access the small trust fund my grandmother left me, after he publicly disowned me. It wasn't like that, Claire insisted, her voice rising. He was just upset. It was a terrible situation. You know Dad when he's angry. He didn't mean all of it. He meant enough of it, I said, my voice low and hard. He meant enough of it to change the course of my entire life. Enough to make sure I learned the hard way what family loyalty really meant in our house. It meant protecting David, at any cost. Another long silence, filled with Claire's shaky breathing. Are you coming? She finally whispered, the desperation palpable. I looked around my bakery. The warm ovens, the racks of cooling bread, the small bustling kitchen. My life, my creation. It wasn't the empire my father built, but it was mine. It was real, unlike the manufactured reality of the Vance family. I thought about the fire. My 18th birthday. David, drunk, trying to light fireworks in the garage. The sparks catching. My screaming. The heat, pushing him out of the way. The beam falling, hitting my hand. David running, scared, telling Dad I'd been careless with candles while messing around. Dad, seeing the chance to bury another one of David's screw-ups, selling the lie. And me, injured, terrified, suddenly the villain in my own story. I don't know, I said honestly to Claire. Coming back meant reopening that wound, stepping back into the place where they had tried to bury me. It meant facing the architects of my pain. A week later, I was driving north on I-91 towards Connecticut. Sarah, my manager, promised to keep everything running smoothly. My little bakery was thriving. It didn't need me to exist. Unlike the Vance family, apparently. Pulling up the long, familiar driveway felt like entering a time warp. The estate looked exactly the same, imposing, perfect, cold. The manicured lawns, the towering oaks, the stone facade that held so many secrets. It didn't feel like coming home. It felt like visiting a museum of my own trauma. Claire opened the heavy front door before I even reached it. She looked even more worn out in person, deep circles under her eyes. She hugged me tightly, clinging as if I might vanish. My arms stayed stiff at my sides. "Thank you for coming, Amelia," she murmured, pulling back, her eyes searching my face. "Really, it means a lot." "How is she?" I asked, bypassing her attempt at emotional connection. "The same. Stable, they say. But unresponsive mostly. She's in the sunroom." Walking down the long hallway, I braced myself. The air was thick with the scent of old money and something else. Decay, maybe? Or just the dust of undisturbed history. I saw the portraits. My father, stern. My mother, smiling faintly. David, at various stages. Graduation, his wedding, accepting some award. All the milestones of the perfect son. As expected, my portrait was gone. My life, my achievements, all erased. My mother was in a hospital bed by the large windows in the sunroom. She was pale, frail, connected to monitors. Her eyes fluttered open as I approached. When she saw me, a flicker of recognition, then tears. "Amelia, you came," she whispered, her voice weak and slurred. She tried to lift her hand, the one not hooked up to an IV. I took it gently. It felt small, fragile. For a second, just 1 second, the little girl who needed her mother resurfaced. "I'm here, Mom," I said softly. Then, the doorway darkened. My father stood there, framed by the light. He looked older, yes, his hair grayer, but the hard set of his jaw was familiar. And behind him, David. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His expensive suit rumpled, his tie loose. The golden shine seemed to have dulled considerably. "Amelia," my father said, stepping into the room. His voice lacked its usual command. I released my mother's hand and turned. Facing them together felt like a physical blow. "Charles," I greeted my father, his name a deliberate distancing. "David." I didn't bother with pleasantries for my brother, either. My father flinched at the lack of dad. David shifted uncomfortably. We need to talk," my father said, glancing at my mother, then back at me. About everything." "Everything?" I echoed, a bitter smile touching my lips. "About how you let your son lie about setting a fire? About how you destroyed my reputation to protect his? About how you abandoned me when I was injured and alone? About how you've pretended I don't exist for 14 years. "That's not fair, Amelia," David burst out, stepping forward. "It was an accident. We were kids. You got burned, yeah, and we felt awful, but Dad had to think about the family name, about the business. It was a difficult situation. Difficult. Situation? My voice was quiet, but laced with venom. Is that what you tell yourself, David? Was it difficult to watch me leave with nothing? Was it difficult to know I was working 3 jobs just to make rent while you were off at your fancy university on Dad's dime? My father held up a hand, trying to regain control. Enough. This is not productive. We are here because your mother is sick, and because I need your help. The second twist. Not just a summons to see the dying matriarch. They needed something. My father, the invincible Charles Vance, admitting need. The irony was almost comical. My help? I raised an eyebrow. The man who said I was worthless needs my help? What could you possibly need from me? Your mother's illness. It's hit me hard, he admitted, looking away. I haven't been focused. The business. There have been mistakes. Significant ones. David stepped in again, hesitant. His investment firm. It's in trouble. Bad investments. A lawsuit. He's been making increasingly erratic decisions. Since Mom got sick, the partners are threatening to pull out. We need someone clear-headed. Someone outside the immediate mess. Someone who understands business. He looked at me then. A flicker of something that might have been respect, or perhaps just calculation, in his eyes. We've heard about your bakery, Amelia. It's successful. You built it yourself. From nothing. You clearly have a head for this. This was it. The deep cut. The ultimate validation of my victimhood, wrapped in a desperate plea. The family that cast me out for daring to have independent thought, for being too much like my father in my drive, now needed that. Very quality because he was failing. They needed the strength they tried to extinguish. So, I said, letting the silence hang heavy before I spoke. Let me get this straight. For 14 years, I was the reckless, unstable liar who couldn't be trusted. I was the burden, the disappointment, the one who didn't understand real business like my brilliant brother here. But now that your world is collapsing, because you made mistakes, suddenly I'm the one with the clear head, the one who understands business. My father's face hardened. Don't be difficult, Amelia. This is serious. The firm is everything. Our legacy. Your legacy? I laughed. A harsh, humorless sound. You talk about legacy? What about my legacy? The legacy of being the daughter you threw away? The legacy of having to fight for every single thing I have while David had everything handed to him? You want help? You want my head for business? What are you offering in return for saving the great Vance legacy? David stammered. A partnership? A role in the firm? Whatever you want, Amelia. We can make it work. Partnership? I scoffed. You think I want a piece of the firm you almost destroyed? You think I want to be tethered to the very thing that represents everything you valued over your own child? I walked towards my father, stopping just a few feet away. My voice was quiet now, but filled with all the pain and resilience of the past 14 years. What I want, I said, looking him directly in the eye, is for you to admit what you did. Not just that it was a difficult situation or mistakes. I want you to admit you chose your reputation over your daughter. I want you to admit you sacrificed me to protect David. I want you to look at the scar on my hand and admit you are responsible. I want you to admit you broke my heart and my trust. He stared back, his face a mask of pride and something else. Fear? He didn't speak. David was silent. Claire was still by my mother's bed, her face buried in her hands. Finally, my father spoke. His voice was low, rough. I can't give you that, Amelia. And there it was, the final confirmation. He still couldn't choose his child's well-being over his own ego, his own narrative. He couldn't offer the one thing I needed for any kind of true reconciliation. "Then you can't have my help," I said, the decision solidifying inside me. It hurt, a deep, familiar ache, but it was also freeing. I was no longer the pleading child, desperate for her father's approval. I was the woman who had survived him. "Get out," I said again, gesturing towards the door of the sunroom. "Both of you." Out of her room. My father hesitated for a moment, then turned and walked out, David following, casting a quick, resentful glance back at me. Claire looked up, her face streaked with tears. "Amelia, please." "Go, Claire," I said softly, turning back to my mother. "Go be with them." She left, her footsteps fading down the hall. I was alone with my mother. I sat back down, taking her hand again. She squeezed it weakly. "Sorry," she whispered again, her eyes fluttering closed. "It's okay, Mom," I said, though it wasn't, not really, but lying felt less exhausting than trying to excavate the truth with her now. I stayed for a while longer, just being present. I talked about Vermont, about the changing leaves, about a new bread recipe I was perfecting. Simple things. A life she knew nothing about, a life I had built in the ruins she and my father had left behind. When I finally left the room, I didn't seek out my father or David. I found Claire sitting in the study, staring out the window. "I'm leaving," I told her. She turned, her eyes red. Did you talk?" "We talked," I confirmed. "They wanted my help with the firm. It's in trouble." She nodded slowly. "Dad told me. He said you refused. They couldn't give me what I needed, Claire." She looked down at her hands. "I know we didn't do the right thing back then, Amelia. Mom and me. Standing by." "You stood by," I agreed, the simple statement holding the weight of 14 years, of hurt. "I was scared," she whispered. "Of him, of what he'd do." "I was scared too, Claire," I said. "But I was 20 and he threw me out anyway." She didn't have an answer for that. She couldn't. "Will you come back?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I paused at the door. My car was waiting outside, ready to take me back to my quiet, safe life. Back to the place where my worth wasn't, measured by a family name or a balance sheet. "Maybe," I said, the word tasting different this time. Less like a definitive no, more like a fragile possibility. A possibility that didn't depend on them changing, but on me deciding if I could ever truly let them back in. On my terms. Driving away from the estate, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I focused on the road ahead. The scar on my hand throbbed, faintly, a constant, dull ache. It was a physical manifestation of their betrayal, yes, but it was also a testament to my survival. They had tried to break me, to bury me under their lies and their privilege, but I had crawled out. I had built something real and good and mine. I had proven them wrong not by taking their empire, but by building my own life, piece by painstaking piece. Weeks turned into months. My mother remained stable, but unresponsive. My father's firm struggled, the news making its way even to my quiet corner of Vermont. David was reportedly working around the clock, trying to salvage it. I didn't offer help. I didn't call. Then, a letter arrived at the bakery. Not on cream-colored cardstock, but plain paper, from Claire. She wrote about Mom, about Dad's stress, about David's struggles, and she wrote, tentatively, about that day. She didn't apologize directly for her silence. Not yet, but she acknowledged it. She said she was starting therapy. Small steps. A month later, another letter. This one included a recent photo of Mom, propped up in bed, looking a little more alert. Claire mentioned Dad was talking about retiring, that David was taking over, facing the mess himself. And at the end, almost as an afterthought, Mom asked about your bread. A few weeks after that, my phone rang. Claire again. Not panicked this time. Just talking. About the weather. About her dog. About Mom's physical therapy. Small, mundane things. Before she hung up, she hesitated. David. He wanted me to tell you. He said he understands now. A little, anyway. About building something. About consequences. It wasn't an apology from David. Not even close. But it was an acknowledgement, perhaps forced by his own struggles, that actions had repercussions, something he'd never truly faced before. I didn't go back to Connecticut. Not yet. Maybe someday. Maybe when the scar didn't pull so tight. Maybe when the bitterness wasn't the first thing I tasted when I thought of them. I stood in my bakery, kneading dough, the familiar comfort of the flour and yeast settling around me. They had tried to define me by their narrative, by their lies, by their act of casting me out. Victim. Liar. Burden. But I had rejected that definition. I was Amelia Vance, baker, business owner, survivor. The scar was a part of my story, a physical mark of what I had overcome. But it wasn't the whole story. My victory wasn't in taking what was theirs, or even in getting a perfect apology. It was in building my own life, finding my own peace, and knowing that my worth was determined by me. And me alone. It was in standing tall, even with a scar, and realizing that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to walk away, and when to simply stand still and let them see the life you built without them. And maybe, just maybe, leaving the door slightly ajar, not for them, but for myself, to decide if and when I was ever ready to face the past again, not as the victim, but as the survivor who had truly won.